ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितमेन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो महावदान्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनामिने गौरतुसे नमः। नमो नमो अनिरुद्धाय हृषिकेशेन्द्रियात्मने नमः परमहंसाय पूर्णाय निवृत्तात्मने स्वर्गपवर्गद्वाराय नित्यं शुचिसदे नमः। नमः हिरण्यवीर्याय चातुर्होत्राय तान्तवे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So today we are on the 26th of March 2015, and we are continuing with our discussion and sharing on Sri Harinam Cintamani, which is a dialogue between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Haridas Thakur, the designated Acharya or authority in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the chanting of the holy names and the Yuga Dharma. So, in the previous session, we were focused on understanding the nature of the blocks that categorize the chanting of the holy names as namabhas, or a dim reflection or a shadow. So in the session prior to that, we understood that the pure name of Krishna is chanted in Goloka, and the names have descended from Goloka to the material plane purely to benefit the conditioned souls, to give pleasure to the devotees and to benefit the conditioned souls. The sambandha of the residents of Goloka to Krishna is fully evident when they call upon his name. They call upon his name with prema because they have complete love of Godhead. They are residents of Sri Vrindavan Dham, they are residents of Goloka, and they have no obfuscation, they have no block. The sambandha in Goloka is full, it's complete, there is no illusion. However, in the material plane, the sambandha, or the knowledge of our very specific relationship with Krishna. Sambandha Gyan is knowledge of who we are, who is Krishna, what is our specific relationship with Krishna, and what is our specific service in association with that relationship. Because one who has established his identity in full will also know the specific service, just as much as the father of a child who has completely established his relationship as a father and recognizes that the person, the child, is in front of him, acts in that relationship. So the identity, once it is firmly established, will reveal the nature of service and the nature of the relationship fully. So in Goloka, all of this is fully revealed, but here in the material sky, we do not have such a luxury. It is covered. It is covered just as much as clouds cover a brilliant sun. The holy names are a brilliant sun, and they're fully manifest. But the clouds cover the sun temporarily and obscuring our vision. And who does the covering? The covering is done due to our own fault. We cover ourselves, we obfuscate, and we block our vision of the holy names, and we are unable to see it. And it takes on three different forms of blocks. The blocks themselves are classified into three different forms by Srila Haridas Thakur. He talks of Asat Trishna, which is being attached to the illusory aspects of life on the planet, on the material plane. Asat, that which is not true. Trishna, which is insignificant, being attached to illusory, insignificant aspects. This is a block. It does not allow us to fully appreciate and come in presence of the full glory of the holy names, even though it's being made available. Hridaya Durbalya. Hridaya Durbalya is again a situation where there's a weakness of heart, and this weakness of heart can be classified in many ways in terms of not so much the, not so much being distracted, but more so because there is a propensity for aspects or propensity for actions and words which may not assist us in being able to fully appreciate the presence of the holy names, enviousness, and so on and so forth. And then there is aparad. Aparad is being dealt with quite extensively in the Harinam Cintamani. Each aparad is taken up as a separate chapter and dealt with quite extensively. Now, when we ended the previous session, we also spoke of the fact that this session we would cover the 4 different attitudes of Namabhas. The dim reflection of the holy names is Nama Abhas. Abhas is dim reflection. Shraddha Abhas is again a dim reflection of Shraddha. So those who have Shraddha Abhas or dim reflection of Shraddha will consequently also be uttering or speaking the dim reflection of the holy names. So there are 4 different attitudes of Namabhas. And the 4 different attitudes are Sanketa Namabhas. And then I'm just going to read it out here. Sanketa Namabhas. And the second attitude, which is a problem again, is So it is Sanketa, which is unintentionally, Parihasa, in ridicule, Stoba, derisively, and Hela, with disregard and neglect. And we'll be taking upon each one of these and looking into it in quite some detail. Sanketa is very interesting because it can be classified into 2 different types. The first type is where someone is calling upon the Lord's names. They're calling upon Krishna's names. They're calling upon Rama's names. They're calling upon the name of Narayan, but with some material conception behind it. And the second category of Sanketa Namabhas is fascinating. It is fascinating to see this very specific category. I was in fact I found it quite amazing when I went a little deeper into studying it. Was the second category of Sanketa Namabhas is that which occurs when someone who is speaking it has absolutely no knowledge that they're even speaking the holy names. Okay? This is unintentional. So let's first cover the Sanketa, which is intentional but has a material conception behind it. The whole of 6th canto in the Srimad Bhagavatam is dedicated to glorification of the holy names. In fact, many topics that we discuss in Harinam Cintamani are based on the verses found in the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Haridas Thakur did speak from the Srimad Bhagavatam when he was referring and speaking on the glories of the holy names. And many of the aspects which we spoke of are found in the 6th canto. Very specifically, there is the story of Ajamila, which is right in the beginning. And Ajamila, the story of Ajamila was actually shared to Sukadev Goswami by the sage Agastya. When Agastya was engaging in devotional service, pure devotional service in the southern part of India, that was when, during his travels, Sukadev Goswami heard the story of Ajamila. It was actually a confidential history. It was not fully available with everyone. So it was made available to Sukadev Goswami so that he could share it with us. And Ajamila was a very pious Brahmana, very young, pious Brahmana who came from very good family, lineage, and who observed all the vows that are ordained for Brahmanas. And this is probably Satya Yuga. So quite naturally, the environment was very conducive. And he observed all the vows that were a part of being Brahmanical. And he was engaging in all the austerities and every kind of puja and all the rituals that are associated with being a Brahmana. He had accumulated a lot of piety, which is born out of ritual. He had. But unfortunately, piety or the performance of any kind of Vedic ritual does not necessarily eliminate all the karmic reactions that are found in our heart. You see, karmic reactions that we are born with, they are called prarabdha, that which is manifest. That which is manifest in this lifetime is called prarabdha. This prarabdha karma is what is seen when an astrologer or jyotishi starts examining a horoscope. He is seeing the manifested reactions because this is occurring on the physical plane. However, behind prarabdha, there is karmic reactions. There are karmic reactions that are yet to manifest, and those are called aprarabdha. Manifest is prarabdha, aprarabdha is unmanifest. And this aprarabdha karma, which is unmanifest, has a tendency to impose its influence in a very subtle manner on us. It acts on the subconscious. Okay? It acts on the subconscious. It produces certain tendencies. So, for instance, it could produce a tendency of wanting to engage in illicit connections because in the past, the person has accumulated such sinful reactions which open them up to such attractions. So it might cause some interest in engaging in illicit connections, and there would be a propensity. In other words, there would be an unseen level of pressure which is seen and which is experienced by the individual at a subconscious level. Okay? This is pressure. It is actually some kind of pressure. It's like a propensity. We do not know where it is coming from. We feel quite embarrassed if we even, kind of are pushed into such thoughts. But it happens. That aprarabdha, which is unmanifest, does not go away easily because it is unmanifest. You're only supposed to deal with that which is manifest when you're dealing with Vedic rituals. The rest of it is still there to experience. So the Vedic rituals, the following of different aspects of Vedic karmakandic rituals to remedy karma, they are quite ineffective in being able to root out desires because the desires themselves are based on aprarabdha. And if someone who feels the propensity to act upon the aprarabdha, someone who feels the propensity to act upon such inclination, performs even one single act, that aprarabdha will become firmly established as a part of his prarabdha. Whatever was unmanifest starts putting pressure. If someone acts on the pressure on the physical plane, then that pressure and that unmanifest karma becomes manifest. One begins experiencing the full effects. So even though Ajamila was a fully regulated Brahmana in this lifetime, he was dealing with all the rituals of Brahmanical life, he was dealing with all the readings and so on and so forth of Brahmanical life, the propensities for sense gratification and the desires that are dormant had not left him because he was not in touch with the process that could uproot that. Even Jnana Marga, which is Nivritti Marga, this is dealt with quite extensively in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. In Jnana Marga, which is Nivritti Marga, what is Nivritti? Nivritti is to give up. Okay? Jnana Marga is all about giving up. Someone who maintains a very high order and starts getting into Jnana Marga, they give up attachment. But even such cases, it is said that it is like the burning of a root, the remnants of the root would still remain. And if it is cultivated or in some form or the other, if there is any life in it, it would come up again. In other words, it is like burning a creeper. And that creeper would still leave its mark and it will still remain, but in a dried form, which can still ignite, which can still be cultivated. That is Nivritti Marga. The glories of Nivritti Marga are taught by Sri Sukadeva Goswami in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the second canto. In the third canto, Pavarti Marga is taught. What is Pavarti? Pavarti is that which you do in Karma Kanda, which is where you don't give up, but then you follow the rules and regulations of Varnashrama, and then you follow the rules and regulations of the Vedas, and then follow the Karmakandic rituals, and you perform Karmakandic rituals, and then try and alleviate, sinful reactions, and you atone for past reactions. But the greatest difficulty with atoning for past reactions by performing rituals ordained in the Vedas is that you'll be committing more reactions. To perform rituals, you need to act. That becomes a reaction. So the activity to remove itself is binding. So it's almost like a situation where you're trying to resolve something, but you cannot because something else is putting pressure on you. Okay? So in summary, Ajamila, even though he was maintaining a very pure life by Brahminical standards in the Vedic age, his desires that were dormant were still very much present. So while he was getting back home one day, he saw a woman, a low-class woman, in a compromising position with another low-class man. They were engaging in sense gratification, and he saw this vision. And this vision was so powerful in his mind that it went and imprinted his chitta, and he could not rub it off. He tried sleeping over it, as it is said. He could not. He kept thinking about the woman. He kept thinking about the situation. He kept thinking, and the image of that particular incident kept coming up in his mind, and he allowed it to cultivate. Right? Krishna talks about it in the Bhagavad Gita that you contemplate on the objects of the senses, and after contemplation, attachment arises. After attachment, one develops lust, and then one begins pursuing it, and on not obtaining it, they become angry. This is the sequence, right? He equates lust with anger, but it all starts with contemplation, and contemplation occurs when someone sees something. It's like window shopping, as dangerous as real shopping, okay? Because you develop desires. So someone like Ajamila just saw a woman in an unwanted situation. He saw something which should not have been seen, and that was very graphic, and he could not remove it. We spoke about it the previous session, that watching movies and watching, whatever it is, the class of entertainment that's available now, is actually harmful. Why? Because without our knowing, we are leaving a lot of impressions that are going to be very difficult to remove. So it is like coating ourselves with layers and layers of problems, because all of these would come up. And on a weekday, I'm not talking about W-E-E-K, I'm talking about W-E-A-K, weekday, on a day when we are weak, when our senses are weak, when we're physically weak and mentally weak, this accumulation of nonsense can overpower us. It can overpower us. That is why it's very important for us to regulate our senses by not exposing ourselves to situations of this kind. So Ajamila, he could not contain himself as the contemplation developed into attachment and into lust. He pursued that woman, and he brought her home as a servant maid, and he began a relationship with her, and that relationship resulted in him neglecting his lawfully wedded wife, who was a young, and in the Bhagavatam it is described, very beautiful young wife. He completely neglected her, and instead he brought this woman of low character, and this woman of low character gave him children. And since he was in touch with a woman of low character, and since he ate food cooked by a woman of low character, he developed low character. The fall down was even more precipitous. because of Asat Sangha. Because of Asat Sangha. Asat Sangha is just not going and having a chat. It is about partaking food cooked by people who have absolutely no concept of what is right and what is wrong. And that will have its deleterious effect. It will have an effect on us. So he developed habits of wanting to accumulate wealth to take care of his family in a manner which was extraordinarily sinful. And as this continued, he became quite old. But because of his previous samskara and of being in touch with Vedic rituals, of being in touch with Brahmanical life, he named his son Narayana. He named his son with the Lord's name by the virtue of his pious credits from the past. By virtue of being in touch with society which was in the Vedic age. So that was his good fortune. He named his son Narayana. Even though he was involved in all kinds of actions, he named his son Narayana. Now, at the time of death, one day when he was quite old, at the time of death, he began losing consciousness. And at that point, out of fear, and after he saw that there were very fierce-looking Yamadutas who were approaching to take him out of his body, the Yamadutas, they arrive exactly at a time which is fixed by the karmic reactions themselves. If people commit intense bad karma, then death and the longevity of the person can greatly reduce. The longevity of a person reduces. So Yamaraj and his servants, the servants of Yamaraj, the Yamadutas, they arrived to take him away because the time had come. And out of fear, he started calling out the name Narayana. He called his son. He was not calling the Lord. He called his son. Now, this is Sanketa Namabhas. It is chanted without offense. There was no offense in his calling out Narayana. No offense. But it is Sanketa Namabhas. It is a dim reflection of the holy names. It is a dim reflection of the holy names because it is chanted without offense. It becomes Abhas. I'm sorry, it becomes Namabhas. He was calling out his son Narayana. But it was without offense. So when he called out his name Narayana without offense and unintentionally, but with a material conception, the conception was material. He was calling his son. He was not calling upon the Lord. Immediately, the Vishnu Dutas manifested and they began intervening with the future of Ajamila's progress out of the body, right? They began intervening. The intervention happened immediately. The moment he called Narayana, it was unoffensive. It was in Namabhas. Vishnu Dutas were there. Immediate. They stopped the Yamadutas and they told them that no, this soul cannot be taken out. He cannot be subjected to the same kind of treatment a sinful person would have because he has no sinful reactions. It is fascinating to see that uttering the name of the Lord without offense, but unintentionally, which is Sanketa Namabhas, grants one liberation because he was in touch with Vishnu Dutas. He was now in touch with the pure devotees in the residence of Vaikuntha. Their very presence would be purifying. He was now in touch with them. There they were, right in front of him. He had vision. And what will it do if you have vision of the Vishnu Dutas to you? What will it do to your faith if you see Vishnu Dutas in their helmets, in their, their arms with the conch shells and the bluish forms, which are exact replicas of Lord Vishnu? What would happen to our faith? Can you imagine the incredible gift of Shraddha that Ajamila received by just calling out the holy names without offense, but with no intention of calling out the holy names? It was unintentional. It was Sanketa Namabhas, and it was completely with a material conception, but this was intervention. And this intervention deposited faith, Shraddha. because he was witness to the entire dialogue of the glories of the holy names between the Vishnu Dutas and the Yamadutas. And he could also see that authoritatively the Vishnu Dutas qualified him as someone who was absolutely sinless. It was bewildering. It was actually bewildering for Ajamila to even witness this. But he was given an experience which very few people could have. He saw Vishnu Dutas. Can you imagine what that would do to faith? What would that experience do to the faith of anyone who is chanting? And this was unoffensive, but chanted with a material conception. Fascinating, just fascinating to see the potency of the holy names where someone gets liberated. So now what happens? His lifespan is no longer in control of his karmic reactions because he has become sinless. His lifespan is now in control of the Lord himself. His lifespan goes from Maya to Yoga Maya. Correct? His lifespan goes from Sri Maya Devi to Yoga Maya, where she takes control and says that, okay, I will give you time until you finish your bhajan. I will give you time until you complete your sadhana. Because you have begun it. You've been given a second chance. Srila Prabhupada's book was called Second Chance, I guess, when they printed out this book. It was a second chance. So Sri Maya Devi will now become Yoga Maya and facilitate the sambandha, facilitate the specific lila and the reactions and so on and so forth between the soul and the Supreme Lord. So it is fascinating. And all this by just uttering the name of the Lord in Sanketa. Unoffensive, but with no intention of calling upon the Lord, and this is the benefit. This is liberation. So Ajamila immediately wakes up, understanding his good fortune, and he tries speaking something to the Vishnu Dutas, but they disappear. Right? But then he gets a lesson. He gets a second chance, and he gets such an extraordinary experience which can awaken most people. And true to his nature, he was pious in the past, so he was able to understand, and everything comes back to him. He was able to understand because he knew what piety was. He was already experienced in terms of what a pure life was. So it was not very difficult for him to understand. So immediately he picks up and then goes to Haridwar, specifically Haridwara, and sits down and meditates on the holy names. And very soon he gives up his body, and a Vimana arrives from Vaikuntha, and he sees, or the Bhagavatam describes that he receives a spiritual body like the residents of Vaikuntha, and he leaves for the Vaikuntha Loka. And all this for calling upon the holy name unintentionally, with a material conception, but without offense. This is Sanketa Namabhas. Now, the other category of Namabhas, which is Sanketa, is that which the Muslims, this is even more fascinating. It's even more fascinating to see this very special karmic arrangement that is being made for everyone. When the Muslim, or those who follow Islam, when they call out haram, when they say haram, the name of Rama is intact in haram. You see, it is not broken. It is not broken. When they call out haram, they are calling out Rama's name fully. Now, this is someone who has absolutely no knowledge. Okay? He has absolutely no knowledge, but it is Sanketa Namabhas, and it is considered unoffensive. Why? Because there's no intention of committing offense when he is saying haram. Can you imagine the extraordinary good fortune which has actually been bestowed upon human beings by the Supreme Lord? This mercy is only available through Nama Prabhu. This is only available through the holy names. No one else can provide this mercy that someone says haram. And they would never imagine that they're getting mercy. They would even have no understanding that they could possibly get mercy. Someone who says the word haram gets picked up, and their entire karmic reactions and so on and so forth can change, can potentially change. It does not mean that they would immediately get liberation, but the process of liberation would begin. The process of them being them being able to move forward begins. Okay, it does begin, and it is such a wonderful arrangement because in terms of the Abrahamic religions, or you can say the religions that have come from Abraham, Islam, Christianity, and the Jewish faith, there's a certain progression where one who qualifies out of Islam can get upgraded to become a Christian. One who qualifies out of Christianity can get upgraded to become a Jew, because the rituals of Jews are far more intricate and they're more potent. Okay, they have a lot more culture. So there's a gradation of how they can proceed. And then eventually they get into the Vedic paradigm, where they get very close to Godhead and they have a deeper understanding. Okay, so this evolution is also well understood, that there are certain stages people have to pass through, and this process can begin such a stage. It qualifies them to start moving towards what is the real deal. And all because they call out the name of the Lord unintentionally, Sanket, but it is without offenses. Haram. Can you believe that? They say that when they see pigs, when they see pigs or something like that, they say haram. And they're chanting the name of Lord Ram without breaking it. And that qualifies as Sanket Namabas according to Srila Haridas Thakur, the Namacharya. Can you believe what the Yuga Dharma is all about? It's inconceivable that such a beautiful karmic arrangement is also being made for those who would never ever come close. So it's fascinating to see the arrangement that's being made by the Lord. Now, I will take on a couple of more, which is the third one. The second category is parihasa, in ridicule. This was done by Jarasandha. Jarasandha, he was the father-in-law of Kamsa, and as a consequence, he hated Krishna. He hated Krishna Balaram because his son-in-law, his daughters became widows. He hated Krishna Balaram, and as a consequence, he used to ridicule Krishna. He used to he used to talk in a very manner of, he used to jest and he used to ridicule Krishna. But there was great absorption. It is said that even Jarasandha obtained liberation. It is not pratikul. It is not anukul, it is pratikul. They are against Krishna. They are not favorable to Krishna, these personalities. But they are still awarded liberation because they call upon the holy name, and it is being done so. And this is namabas, but it is being done in ridicule. It is being ridiculed, but it is accepted. And somehow or the other, they make progress. The third category of namabas is calling upon Krishna's names derisively. Derisively means calling upon the names with hatred. For instance, the brothers, the bodyguard, the guards of Vishnu, of Vaikuntha, Jaya and Vijaya, as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, they were completely absorbed in the Lord, in his Varaha and the Narasimha Rupa, but with great anger. They were completely against Vishnu and Narayan, but anger was so heavy and so intense they constantly remembered. And then again, as Ravana and Kumbhakarna, constant remembrance of the Lord, but it was pratikul, it was not anukul, it was against, it was unfavorable. And then in the third was Sishupal and Dantavakra in Krishna's Leela. Now Sishupal had great hatred for Krishna and used to talk upon Krishna in a very insulting manner. But there was a lot of absorption. So it is said that when Krishna severed his neck with the Sudarshan Chakra in the assembly of Yudhishthira during the Rajasuya Yajna, the soul who was Shishupal merged into Krishna's body. But because Shishupal was Jaya, the bodyguard in Vaikuntha, who was already a liberated soul, and they were just participating in a curse, they again got their positions very close to the Lord as doorkeepers. In other words, their liberation was not Sayujya, it was not a merger into Krishna's existence without identity. Okay? So these are the four different categories. We saw four different attitudes: Sanketa, unintentional; Parihasa, in ridicule; Stoba, derisively; and Hela. Hela is that which is said with disregard, with neglect, and even that is a category of Namabas. These are four attitudes. Okay? These are four different attitudes which is being done with disregard, with neglect, and so on and so forth. Now, next week, what we will do is we will end the topic on Namabas and we'll also begin the next one. There are two different kinds of Namabas. So, first we saw the reasons for Namabas, or rather, the reasons for what is called Namabas. We looked at Asat Trishna, we looked at Hridaya Durbalya, and then we looked at Aparad. Next, we saw the four different attitudes of Namabas, which is unintentional, ridicule, derisively, and disregard. These are the four different attitudes that result in Namabas, four different attitudes. And then there is also two kinds of Namabas. And the two kinds of Namabas are Chaya Namabas, and the other is Pratibimba. Chaya Namabas is a category where someone has Shraddha, which is Chaya. And Pratibimba is a distortion. Pratibimba is a reflection. A reflection normally is a distortion. We'll talk about these two, and we will also get into the next chapter in Sri Harinam Cintamani in the coming week. And the next chapter and subsequent chapters are all associated with the offenses, Namaprad. So it would be of great use to us as we reflect on how to improve on those. So to quickly summarize, today we saw the four different attitudes of someone who is chanting the Abbas, or the dim reflection of the holy names. So we saw the Namabas, which is unintentional. In unintentional, we saw two types. We saw the one that has a material conception, but it is unintentional, calling upon the Lord's name. And then we see the other where there's complete ignorance of what the Lord's name is. It's actually a part of something else. And we looked at the example of the first one is Ajamila, where he calls upon Narayana, material conception, because he thinks it's the sun. The second one we see is actually belongs to the calling of the Muslims. When they use the word haram, they're calling upon the holy name, Ram. Okay, that is counted as Namabas, which is fascinating to see the amazing opportunity and the karmic arrangement that's being made for people to progress. And it's only possible in the Yuga Dharma, it's only possible with Nama. No one, there's no other process that people can engage in a manner of unintentional or derisively or in ridicule and so on, and still get to liberation. Okay, then we looked at Jarasandha, where he had very low regard for Krishna, and he used to speak Krishna's name with somewhat some kind of ridicule. He used to talk about it in a very manner of joke. For instance, he used to consider him as insignificant. And then you had Shishupal, who had great anger, and he used to call upon Krishna's names with great anger because he was already incensed with anger because of the previous birth as Ravana, and the one before that was Hiranyakashipu. There was a lot of samskara. Okay, and then we looked at the category of Hela. Hela is disregard and neglect. Disregard and neglect is mostly done by Mayavadis, people who have complete distortion in their hearts. It is done by the Mayavadis, where they do not consider Krishna and his holy names, and they do not consider anything of Krishna to be sacred. In other words, even though they call upon it, they ultimately believe that all of this is false. So this is the category of Hela, and this is also Namabas. So we'll stop here and we'll see if you have any questions. Okay, there's a question here. I was trying to look. Inattentive chanting belongs to what type of namabhas? Inattentive chanting would belong to the last category of hela, where we disregard. See, inattentiveness comes due to not understanding what we have been given by the acharyas. But one has to understand that when those who have received the holy names in the disciplic succession, those of us who have received Sambandha Gyan, those of us who have been given exposure to the glories of the holy names by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, by the mercy of Mahaprabhu, we are in the line of Sriman Mahaprabhu. We should understand that we are chanters of the holy names with Shraddha. Okay? So our Shraddha is quite high. So in that sense, what we need to do is to look at our own chanting as having Shraddha, but at the same time, there is a little disregard because the lack of Sambandha. The Sambandha Gyan is not fully present. So this falls in this fourth category of Hela, disregard, because we don't pay full attention because of a lack of Sambandha Gyan. As the Sambandha increases and we understand who Krishna is and who we are, it will not occur. One cannot call upon someone whom they dearly love with disregard. So automatically the Sambandha would allow us to chant upon his names without the great aparad of lack of attention. Okay. Shafi Mataji. So like Krishna's name is Krishna himself, other demigods like Surya, Shiva are also present in their names, and Ganesha too. So the question is the name of Lord Surya, Lord Shiva, name of Lord Ganesh, are they non-different from their names? No, not necessarily. The reason we are saying that is because the manifestation of someone's name, form, qualities, and Leela, all of these would remain profound as long as they are a part of the spiritual sky. So higher the level of existence, greater would be the profundity in being able to call. Okay? That is the point. Because in the case of, for example, of Surya, it's a position. If you say the name of Lord Indra, it's a position. Lord Brahma is a position, right? Lord Ganesha, of course, he has a spiritual feature. Lord Shiva has a spiritual feature that would surely be an effect on consciousness. But the point we're trying to make here is you cannot equate the names of demigods with that of Krishna to have the same potency. But since they are of a subtle level, they can also manifest themselves when we call upon their names. Is that clear? They can manifest themselves because we call upon their names, because they are also present in the subtle level. Unlike human beings who are cased in a material body, where someone calls your name, and if you're not in the physical plane, you cannot hear. But since they are not on the physical plane, they can hear. But their names are not the same level as Krishna's names, because Krishna's names are in the spiritual sky. But Krishna does say in the Bhagavad Gita that if you constantly meditate on the names of Lord Shiva, you will attain Lord Shiva's planet. If you constantly meditate on the name of, for example, Lord Brahma, you will attain the planet. So that is true. We can always attain the place where they are. It is not the same as human beings, but it is not the same as Krishna's names either. I hope that answers your question. Because they are subtle. So yes, if you call upon the name, they can manifest. But the name, it's non-different. Krishna's name is Krishna himself. Surya's name is not necessarily Surya himself. Because sometimes when you call upon the name of a demigod, it could be the position. Indra is a position, right? Sometimes the Lord himself occupies the seat of Indra. So there is some differences there. That is the point which you wanted to make. Which verse in Bhagavad Gita has its reference? No, the reference is that we would attain the state that which at the we will attain the state of whatever we remember at the time of death. So we will attain the planet of the demigods. It is available there. I'll pass on the reference to you, the specific reference. I do not know the exact verse number. I don't recall it off the top of my head, but I will pass it on to you. Will chanting take care of aprarabdha karma? Yes. The holy names are the only means which uproot desires. Desires caused by prarabdha, desires caused by aprarabdha, kuta, bija, everything is completely uprooted and thrown away only by the mercy of the holy names. Thank you. So if there are no more questions, we will end the session. You can post your questions and you can have your discussions right below the video that is available on the website. Okay, I have one more question. Does holy name change prarabdha? Of course, it does. Have the best way for us to see if the holy name impacts prarabdha, manifested reactions, is to see the way our own desires have changed. Haven't our desires changed after coming to Krishna consciousness? How could desires change without changing prarabdha? Haven't we developed desires to associate, to eat, sleep, mate, defend in a certain way? This is a reflection of our being able to make advancement and to be relieved of the affliction of the body. So does the holy name change prarabdha? Yes. Because the entire effect of the changes of the holy name of anartha nivritti, nishtha, ruchi, ashakti, bhava, prema, everything is experienced while being in this body, while being on the planet. So does it change prarabdha? Of course, it does. When someone is very pure, all they have left is just that amount of reactions from the previous birth which would keep them in the body. Everything else gets removed. So prarabdha, aprarabdha, and everything else that is associated with the past is completely removed. And in fact, that is the reason why the person is completely Krishna conscious, because they go back all the way to their original existence. There's nothing in between. The millions and millions of births have gone away. They go back all the way to what they were in the original existence. Okay, thank you very much for attending, and we will meet in the subsequent session, which is next week on Monday. And I'm very excited about the future because we're going to be touching upon Namaprad, all the 10 offenses to the holy name. Hopefully, we can make a lot of progress in our chanting. Hare Krishna.